Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jake Freivald, and I'm here with Bud Miller. We're going to talk about surveys and line sag and drones, oh my, and really talk about some of the things that Bud has done out in the field. Should be an exceptionally interesting conversation today because there's just so much going on. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Normally at this point I would put in an agenda, but we have talked a bit about how we're going to approach the day. We are not going to be going through a full agenda the way that we might normally. This is a conversation, and we'd like you to join into that conversation by putting your questions into the question field in GoToWebinar. So we're happy to talk about anything, but we expect our conversation to be structured around some use cases. Specifically, there's going to be some talk about drone deployment, but there's going to be a lot more besides that too. But I just know that drone deployment is something people are very interested in. We'll talk a little bit about best practices, both along the way and maybe as a separate topic of conversation. And then we'll get to, maybe some final takeaways as we get to the end. At any point, drop in those questions. We'll incorporate them into our discussion whenever we get the chance. Now, just a little bit by way of introduction. First about Fulcrum and then about Bud. Fulcrum is a field-first platform for data collection and process management. So three important parts there: field, the data that we collect, and the processes that we use in the field to manage the different kinds of activities that we have to do. And the bottom line for Fulcrum is we're all about boosting productivity and streamlining operations. There's a ton I could say there. I'm going to stop talking now because you're going to see some of that come out during the conversation we have with Bud today. Now I'd like to introduce Bud Miller, who is our guest of honor today. He has over 30 years of experience as a problem solver in a variety of different kinds of circumstances. As a field surveyor, he's trained office and field staff to capture data and field notes effectively. As an FAA certified drone pilot, he's flown hundreds of LiDAR missions, including dealing with the FAA's airspace waivers and other requirements, as well as the details of mission planning and execution. And as a problem solver of all types, he's created apps in Fulcrum. He's worked with software like AutoCAD, Civil 3D, QGIS, and more. And although he doesn't really consider himself a developer per se, as we talk today, you'll see that he's got some chops, but he's not really a developer per se. When he saw a gap in the capabilities for legal description writing, he created software called QLegal for Civil 3D, and that connects the dots between Civil 3D and Microsoft Word. This is software that's still kicking. It's got over 500 installations worldwide, and you can go look more about that at Bud's website. So Bud, quite a history. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Great to be here, Jake. Thank you.
All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the slides so we can begin the conversation. And let's see how this works. Excellent. And what I'd like to do, Bud, is just open the floor a little bit to talk about some of the kind of the use cases that you've seen in Fulcrum. I gave you a brief introduction. If there's more you want to add there, then that's fine. But let's talk a little bit about the kinds of problems you've solved in your career. I understand there's been a lot around utility surveying, for example. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I worked for RTR Energy Solutions until January of this year. I was there for 9 years. And RTR started in 2014 in the utility sector to basically do project management, outage sequencing, environmental inspections. And I was brought in 2 years after they were founded to start a CAD department and start a survey department. At a couple of years in, I reached out to a friend of mine, Mike Kunkel, whom I had worked with at another company. He came on board and brought his knowledge of Fulcrum and his experience with it to RTR, and that's when I got my hands on it. And for the last 5 years, I've been using it to build out RTR's departments, including environmental inspections, constructability walkdowns. We got into develop the drone program, so we were doing LiDAR. We have apps for that. I do a lot of large construction projects for local utility with, a couple of hundred structures to stake out. So I got into the webhook and data sharing that Fulcrum makes available. Basically, we went completely paperless, thanks in large part to using Fulcrum across the company.
Super. And some of the things that we talked about as we were preparing for this conversation was about the webhooks and pardon me, the web shares and event triggers and things like you were using. And one of the use cases you talked about there, the context for that was a utility survey where you were doing a stakeout of structures to be built. I may have that wrong. Tell me if I'm, could you talk a little bit about what you were doing there and how you were using Fulcrum in that context?
Yeah, we're given a CSV file or a KMZ with the design structure locations. And using Fulcrum's import capabilities, I was able to import those GPS locations into an app and add data shares so that while we're in the field, we can not only navigate to where the structure is supposed to be, but mark them as staked and then sync the app. And then our client can just refresh the web page and know, the progress we've made for the day.
So talk a little bit about that. There's the app for the person in the field, and then there's data that you're sharing with the client. Talk to me about what the client was using that data for, and why it was necessary for it to show up in real time or things of that nature. How did you make that sharing happen? That sort of thing.
Well, there was at least one instance where my partner Mike showed up to a site, and there were crews basically sitting around doing nothing because they couldn't access the right-of-way due to vehicles, sheds, gardens. Some people build gardens, and there's no access to the website. So we thought, we're there first to stake the line, so why don't we take photographs and share them via data share so that our client can refresh the web page and maybe not scramble a crew if there is no access to the line. So we were sharing everything, temperature, date and time, photographs to a website so that, we didn't have to call them, we didn't have to email them. They were just, refresh the page and see what current conditions were.
And you say
that whole process is, Fulcrum makes it so easy. It's literally 10 minutes to get a snippet of code. If you have access to your website, that is, create a new web page, paste the code, and it's live, and just send a link to your client.
And you were saying that you weren't having to use phone calls and things of that nature. I assume that that's the way that things were done prior to Fulcrum. Do you have insight into how things were done prior to Fulcrum and what they would have to do to make that happen? Or I guess if it didn't happen at all, they'd have people just stopped and not working at all.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't know that it happened. Yeah.
So you were talking about the stakeout surveys, and you had also talked about avian guards and some structures that you were working on as well. Can you talk about that use case a little bit?
Yeah, Fulcrum was essential in that case. We were, our local utility owned some lines up in Rhode Island, and they had in the first trip we took, my partner Jordan and I went up, and there were 220 structures. The utility did not know if they had avian guards, which are bird protection, or not. And we were directed that if they did, to use either drones when we could fly, or ground-based photography if we couldn't, to capture pictures of them. And if they didn't have avian guards, we need photography so that they could design the correct kind of avian guards, because they didn't know what they owned. Is it a wood pole? Is it a steel monopole? Is it a lattice tower? So Jordan and I uploaded all of the locations into Fulcrum, and then we divided it up because there were two of us. We each had a drone, and we decided to tackle it, starting in the center and going east and west. And Fulcrum allows you to get driving directions. And this area we were working in was near an airport, crossed several highways. It was very complicated, but Fulcrum allows you to get driving directions. So we were able to capture 220 structures, two of us in under 2 days.
Which was a significant amount at that time. They weren't able to get anywhere close to that without using Fulcrum to do that.
I don't know how you would do that without some kind of aid. because you got to go miles out of your way, find exits to highways, and there was a lot of walking involved and a lot of, you're driving for 20 minutes trying to find a structure to get a photograph of, so you've got to get
Sure.
close to it. Yeah. We weren't using survey equipment. We just had 2 trucks and, Fulcrum and our drones.
Now, at the time that you were doing this, you don't consider yourself a developer from what I've seen, right? So you're making this happen with Fulcrum. What's your development process for this kind of ad hoc requirement? What did you do in that situation?
Well, by the time we got to that specific project, I knew how to import CSV files.
Mm-hmm.
The KMZ was a little unique because I had to find an outside website to convert the KMZ into coordinates that I could upload into Fulcrum.
Can you tell, for people who don't know, what a KMZ file is?
KMZ is Google Earth.
Right. So
quite often that's all we had to go on. That's all we were given from the utility.
So you were converting from this Google Earth proprietary format to just other geocoordinates that you could then upload into Fulcrum as part of the import process.
Yeah, I had to get them to latitude, longitude.
Right.
Because Fulcrum, you can't directly import a KMZ.
And
as far as I know.
And when you're doing the when you're building out the app for this process, it's kind of an ad hoc requirement. You're told, here, you got to go to these places and figure out what's going on. How are you building an app when the specification is fairly loose? Are you just dragging and dropping stuff in until it works? How are you managing that?
Well, I think in that case, I can show you actually. I'll pull it up.
Okay.
Can I share my screen? That might help.
Probably have not done that for you yet. Give me 1 second. I'll make you a presenter. You should be able to pull anything up now.
Got it. So you should see my, this is my phone.
Yep.
So we set up a project. Jordan's been back. He went back and with 2 other guys and did another 400 structures. But initially we did 200 together. So this is the app. And we went with drones, but we understood that we were near an airport, so we couldn't fly everything.
Yeah.
So in the case that we had to fly, so that we didn't overlap each other, we decided, which structure are you standing at and which direction are you going to fly? So in the end, we realized the sun rises in the east, so we didn't want to fly into the sun. So we decided he would start midway on a line. I would start at the eastern end of the line. We'd both fly west so that we wouldn't duplicate any effort.
And how difficult was it? Sorry, go ahead.
So in this case, we didn't fly because we couldn't due to FAA restrictions. So we took ground photos with Fulcrum.
So you just had to create an app that would enable you to handle both of those situations, and you as a non-developer, you're just kind of putting this together to say, okay, what do I need to account for, and putting that stuff on the screen.
Yeah, those are all the locations that we were given. There were 2 sections. One, this is near the airport. You can see the airport right there.
Yeah.
So flying there was really difficult and sometimes impossible. And then we had a southern section. This is where Jordan started in the center. I started on the east, and we both flew west.
Got it.
Stopping in each structure. You could probably do 5 or 6 structures comfortably it's a really small drone just for photography. So there was 5 or 6 structures you couldn't see it anymore, so you had to bring it back, land, and then move.
And we're going to get into more detail on drones later, both for this and what you were doing with LiDAR in the future. Let's talk a little bit about the power lines that you were working on where you were dealing with SAG. Can you describe for us what SAG is so we understand the use case pretty well and the process you went through in order to manage SAG with Fulcrum?
Absolutely. I have a very rudimentary photograph or image that makes it kind of obvious what SAG is. In our case, is measured at the center of the line between 2 structures. So SAG is measured because the transmission line expands as the temperature increases and contracts when the temperature decreases. So it's critical to get the sag to within design specifications based on a chart, which I can also show you, like this, which is what we're given in the field. It's every 10 degrees. So you can find the line number on the left column, or I mean the span number, sorry. And then you just go over to find the correct temperature, and you can see what the sag is supposed to be. So we did this two ways. We did it both active sagging, which means we set up a survey instrument, shoot the connecting points on both ends, determine the distance between them, divide it by 2, and then drop it by the amount shown on that chart based on ambient, or not ambient air temperature, approximate wire temperature, which we use a device called a sagometer, believe it or not, which looks like this, a piece of transmission wire with a thermometer inside it. And we actually put that up in the air, like you can see it in this picture. Sagometers up here, as close as we can get to maybe 15, 20 feet, depending on the wind, and which will differ from ambient air. And that's what the sag charts are based on.
So you're given some pretty specific information, but it's in a kind of a clunky format. And you know, one thing that strikes me about this use case and the prior couple is that you're just being scrappy about whatever you've got, right? You're not given stuff that's easy. You are given specific data. Maybe it's in a CSV, maybe it's on a PDF, and you just get whatever that data is and you mash it together however you can. So here you've got the same kind of situation. You've got this data on a piece of paper, and I believe that, or that PDF, and I believe that PDF, if I remember our discussion correctly, that never got converted into something easier because it wouldn't have been worth the effort. Like you were still using that the whole way through, right?
Yeah, in the case of sag, I mean, the structures exist already. Yep. So we wouldn't have been given a KMZ or anything. We were actually given a plan set showing the design of the entire line, which maybe, 5, 6, 7 miles.
Yeah.
And our job was to find the correct span to either actively sag or verify after it's been built.
So when you say actively sag, you mean you're positioning that, like you showed in that photo, you're making sure that the wire gets to that point, or you're coming back later and inspecting to make sure that it's within tolerance for that temperature.
Correct, and quite often we did both. So we would set up with our instrument, and the guys would be in the buckets, and there's a truck down the line physically pulling the conductor until it sags where we tell them to stop. We're on the radio all day. And quite often there were other surveyors, a mile down and a mile up doing the same thing.
Right. So this app, you want to walk us through the app that you've got here that you use to manage that process?
Yeah. I mean, the critical thing is temperature. So you could sag all day, and if you didn't record the approximate conductor temperature, there's nothing to look up and you have no data. So it was critical that we record everything as we did it. So in this case, we have a status, is it active or verification sag? Date is automated, obviously. And then the span checked area is the total number of spans we did for the day. And that's updated as we sag. So in this case, we did 9 spans. The numbers are transmission structures. We also use this app to do billing. So, how much did we spend on meals? Was it one-man crew or two-man crew? How far did we drive? And we sent that out to a spreadsheet just because we had it, why write it down? It was so simple. Did we have lodging? We attach receipts. But then we go to the actual spans. Obviously, which span is it? What time did it start and stop? The design we typed from that chart that I just showed you.
Right.
And then we would physically shoot the attachment points on both ends. So, and enter that in here. So in this case, design was 769. We shot 768. So if they're that close, you can reasonably assume you're looking at the right chart, and there wasn't, a version problem. And then quarter length is just that survey distance divided by 4 because the clients that we work with wanted a shot a quarter down the wire, halfway, and 3/4, which ends up in a spreadsheet that I'll show you in a minute. So that was just an easy way for us to get the quarter length. The air temperature we take before we start, and the wire temperature we take before and after. Obviously, in spring, if you're in shade and it's 8 o'clock in the morning, and if this takes an hour and the sun comes out, things change.
Sure.
And then we obviously locate with GPS where we're standing. And then the numbers under the notes column are the distance between each of the attachment points. So the image I showed you only had 1 wire. Most times we had 8, 6 conductors and 2 fiber.
Right.
So we noted these just in case there was a big difference, then we'd have to be careful about this quarter distance because it might change.
Yeah. So one of the things that strikes me about this this app. So first of all, if we look at the spans here, the spans are a set of repeatables. So you've got a whole ton of spans as you expect. You've got in the main app itself, you have a field that shows what all those spans are that you've collected. The span is essentially your log for the day. And people, arrange their apps in very different ways. Sometimes you've got something where I've got 1 pole and each pole is its own record in an app. Here, you've got 1 record, and you're talking about a couple of miles worth of wire and worth of spans, and you're even putting in stuff like your meal expenses and stuff like that. So here this feels like very much like, okay, I'm organizing my day around the Fulcrum app. How do I build the Fulcrum app that's in a way that's going to help me manage my day most effectively? Tell me a little bit about how you organize your thinking around an app. Like, what made you decide that this was all going to be put into 1 record in that app versus maybe you've got an example of another app where each item is a very discrete thing and that is going to be the record for that app? How do you decide what to do between those 2 apps?
It all depends on the deliverable. And in this case, the deliverable is the SAG report that I'll show you. So it makes sense to us. We're going to verify SAG for a day. And in this case, we did 9 spans, which is, I think, the most we ever did. And that involves setting up a GPS ground control, collecting with GPS, and switching to robotics, and then shooting everything and turning all the points. So we got the process down to about 20 minutes. So it made sense to me to have a record be a day, because we're going to take this, they need this information right away. So we're going to go back to the office, and the next day, I'm going to create 9 reports and send them directly to the client. So if I had saved this or, had 3 days of sagging in the same file, it might take weeks because we're not going to go back every day to do the entire line. We're doing part of line they need at that time.
Sure.
But in a case like the Rhode Island job that I just showed you, every structure is its own record because we have to create a report for every structure.
So really you're basing your, what you call a record in an app around the reporting that you're doing associated with it. So in the one, because you're doing a report per structure, that's your record, 1 record per structure. Here, because your report is 1 day, like basically the day's work, 1 record is all the spans associated with that day's work. So those spans go into repeatables in 1 record.
Yeah, and I can show you in this, I had some help with the spreadsheet from a Excel guru friend of mine, Mike Plugfelter at RTR. We were able to export, say, this day that you're looking at, right, with 9 spans to a spreadsheet and just select the span that we need to report on, which I can show you.
Why don't we take a look at that report then? Now, when we talk about reporting in Fulcrum, of course, sometimes we're talking about a PDF generated report, a report that we generate. But in your case, very often, you weren't able to do that because there was some specific requirements. Talk about the requirements a little bit, and then let's go look at the report and see how you met those requirements.
Right. In the case of sagging, the report is unnecessary because no one needs it. They need the sheet that I'm going to show you now, which is an Excel generated spreadsheet.
So this was a requirement from the client that it go into this format.
This is what the client expects to see. And the critical column, the only critical part is this number in the sag column. They want this number to be with plus or minus 6 inches, which means they pulled the wire, they clipped it in, and the result is within 6 inches of design.
And all the rest of it is proof that you've done the right thing to get that number, basically.
Correct. Everything you see, I changed this form a little bit to make it a little more obvious, but everything in yellow comes from the Fulcrum app. Latitude, longitude, time. We started time, we finished the weather, ambient air, the wire temperature is right here. The only part of this entire form that we manually enter are the design sag numbers from the sag chart.
Which is that sag chart, is that eye chart you had before, the PDF with the large, all the information on it, all the data.
Correct. Correct. We look up the temperature for that line, and in this case, I set up a little interpolation over here in case it's only done every 10 degrees, so we wanted to be as accurate as possible. So you can interpolate over here, and that number is plugged in to the design.
And how hard was it to get all of this together? What did you see?
With the help, my friend Mike's help, it wasn't that hard at all. But I instantly knew we can set up, VLOOKUPs in Excel. So this tab, app data, is directly exported from Fulcrum.
Okay.
And you can see that some of it's, we don't need, but it's always the same. So we can, look up the columns we need. These are the distances, start time, end time, the span itself.
Yep.
So those are just pulled in here. Now, this is what I said when you asked me about, using child records or not. This is a list of all the spans from that day. There were 9 of them. So if I wanted span 3.2 to 3.3, I click that and I get that span's data. And I just need to paste the survey data onto the shots tab.
So, and here again, scrappy, right? We do whatever we can with the stuff we have available to hit the requirement. Basically, right. You're getting exports and you're pasting them in here, and that makes the Excel part kind of just work. And that gives the client what the client needs in that situation. Definitely not the kind of reporting that Fulcrum does when we're producing these PDFs, but it's what you needed for the task you're doing.
Exactly. So my job is just, how do we get to this form? I mean, before Fulcrum and before automation in Excel, that form, you're talking a couple of hours, a lot of cut and paste, and a lot of checking.
Yeah.
But we use VLOOKUPs and a process that took, you're going from a couple of hours to 10 minutes.
Phenomenal difference, for sure.
Oh, well, it's huge. Just not only in, who wants to cut and paste for, a couple of hours. And also the client gets it maybe the same day. Maybe when we get back to the office, we could send them the sag charts the same day.
Yeah, huge impact. Let's shift to a different, unless you got more to say there, we've got more things to talk about. I think one of the things that I thought was interesting was the transmission line rust inspections you were talking about, where you were basically helping your field workers avoid having to think too hard or do too many calculations on their own, and you were trying to get consistency out of that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we call them Core 10, which means rust. So we have a couple of really experienced linemen at RTR who had, you're talking 35 plus 40 years experience. And they were walking these lines to check for the severity of the rust. Basically, do we have to replace the line? Can we justify replacing the line, or do we not? And so I came up with an app along with direction from the client, in this case, PP&L. So we had to walk, our guys walked the line. And in this case, we're using child records again, because the deliverable is the entire line.
Okay.
So in this case, we have 42 structures between, say, 2 substations.
So one record is all of the all of the items between the two substations. If it's substation to substations, everything in between is one record. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, and every child record is the structure that you're currently looking at.
Yep.
So we were given direction from the client that said we need 4 photographs. We want a full photograph of the entire structure. We want a photograph of the base of the structure, the grid number, which the client uses to identify the structure, and a close-up of an example of rust.
Yep.
The end result is another combination of PDF and Excel. I can't show you that form because it's attorney-client privilege protected, and I don't want to get in any trouble. But basically, we used Excel. And again, a lot of these clients want the form that they're used to seeing. So I have to back-end modify our data to look like they've always seen it. So in this case, basically we had faces and legs. Obviously a face is 4 sides to a lattice tower. Most of these are lattice towers. So our guys basically counted the number of cross braces, and then they counted the occurrence of rust on each one.
Pretty simple task for them to accomplish. Keeps it straightforward.
Yeah. So you can see that as they go, they're counting and taking the 4 photographs, and then I adjusted the app to do the math.
Yep.
In the background.
So these are just calculated fields or something like that in the background. You're just doing a calculated field.
Yeah, they're just looking at one side, 4 sides of a structure, and the app is adding it all up in the background. So in this case, you had 304 total connections on that one structure.
Sure.
Half of it was rusted out, and the other half wasn't. So there's the total percentage, 49%. According to the client, that is moderate.
Okay.
And then we have the 4 pictures.
Yep, super.
And another a nice thing I love about Fulcrum is you can embed instructions. So I told them, in case they, there were cases where they were taking too many pictures. And you can imagine 40 structures in this inspection. If you took 8 pictures instead of 4, it's hundreds of pages.
Yep.
And I was also able to use Fulcrum. I found, if you do enough digging, you can find almost anything, but I found a way to make those 4 pictures fit on one page rather than each being a page. Because some of these, the first time you print them, there's 600 pages of information that no one really needs to go through or print.
One thing that I like about Fulcrum, just speaking as a guy, I mean, I've worked here for 5 years now, but even when I was just coming on board to look at it, there's a lot of documentation around the API, around all the different ways that you can do things with Fulcrum. And so being able to look stuff up and figure out how to tweak it to make it just so has been really helpful, I think.
Yeah, it occurred to me today in thinking about this webinar that if someone were to approach me and say, can Fulcrum do this? I would say you just have to find out how, because it can do almost anything.
Right.
And your support and documentation is just incredible. It's been anything I've tried to do or wanted to do, I could either find it or I ask one of your support team and they tell me.
Yeah, super. Thank you. That's great to hear that.
Yeah, the support I've gotten from Fulcrum's bar none the best I've experienced, even to the point of correcting my code. I paste a snippet of code and they fix it for me.
We don't guarantee that as part of any particular package. Just saying that for the record, we don't guarantee that we're going to correct your code. But it's good that sometimes very, very helpful people though on the customer support side. Yeah,
I mean, sometimes I'm just looking for direction, and well, have you tried this? And it works.
Yeah, cool, good.
Yeah, I've been happy with that. Ecstatic, actually.
Excellent. What else do we want to look at in these apps that we've got here? We had one thing that we do want to get to is the drone conversation. Probably should start that pretty soon. Is there anything you want to talk about before we get to that drone conversation?
With regard to drones, or
just with anything that I don't want to interrupt you too much, but if there's something else you want to say about what we've been talking about, then great. If not, then can we start? We should start talking about the drone work you did with your LiDAR drone.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I've done a lot of, I think there are maybe 30 active apps here, and there may be 10 or 15 that I've made inactive, and every one of them I developed with the person that's going to use them. So I think that's critical, because I don't know how to do a constructability walk down. I've never done one, so I have to sit with the guy who actually does it.
Yep.
To get his input and make sure that it's correct. And wasting their time is not on the table, because these guys are incredibly good at what they do.
I think it
And
helps
my
to
goal
show
was
them.
to get them to move as quickly and efficiently as they could.
I think it's very helpful for them to know that you're being responsive to them too. Do you go out have you gone out on like walkabouts with them as well, like watching them in the field as they go use it as well? Is that part of the development process, or is that more
I
than
have, yeah. I have, yeah. I was fortunate. RTR to just an unbelievable team of really experienced and really cooperative people. We all had the same goal. So
right?
it was. So I spent some time in the field, and I had, in my first week, I had to sit down to go over, utility industry was new to me. I'm from a civil survey background.
Yeah.
Everything was explained to me. So it makes it a lot easier. I like to learn as much as I like to teach. So it was mutually very encouraging.
We've
And we had a
definitely
great
heard.
boss who, gave us Ryan Robinson started the company, and he would give us the room we needed to innovate.
I've definitely heard that from other customers as well, that getting out in the field makes a difference. So what you're saying jives with that. You being able to walk and see what's going on, as opposed to being just staying in the office and trying to build things out based on what you think or what people are telling you. Being able to walk the field. And another thing it does for you is it enables you to think of things that that Fulcrum can do, that the person who's walking might not. They're looking at it in one particular way, and if you can say, hey, here's something that we can do that you're not thinking about, you can have a pretty strong potential for making them much more efficient there too.
Yeah, and in the case of constructability, I know some of these guys didn't live in the area, so they would come in for a couple of weeks and live. They're not at home, and the last thing they want to do is sit in a hotel room and download photographs from an SD card from a digital camera and compile reports. Nobody likes to compile reports, so they bought in, really easily, because they saw the value in it, in terms of, they get to just do what they're good at, and the tedium was taken away from them. So they finished their walk down, they change the status, I get an email, they don't even have to tell me, and they do the next one the next day.
Yeah, and that really drives the adoption, which is what's most important, getting that buy-in, getting the field to adopt it and really use the technology.
Yeah, you can't do it without that.
Yep. Let's talk about drones a little bit. So with respect to what you were doing, as I understand it, these are primarily LiDAR inspections that you were doing with the drones you were working on. Let's talk through. And also, I understand you used Fulcrum in different ways as you were working on your drone projects. So let's talk about some of the ways that you were using Fulcrum for those drone projects, and then talk about how it all kind of assembles together.
Well, my partner Mike Kunkel and I started the drone program. Initially, it was photogrammetry and inspection, and then eventually we convinced the company to spend enough money that we could start a LiDAR program. And I got my drone license during COVID. Mike's had his for years, and we were both aware that the FAA can do something called a ramp check, which just means they could show up unannounced to wherever you're flying and ask to see your credentials, your license, your driver's license, your maintenance reports for your drone, your FAA approvals if they're required. And we started with a notebook, a binder, but things go out of date, so I thought, let's build an app and keep it all in the app. So that's what we started to do. And the other thing, when we started with LiDAR, we didn't know, having had no experience, how high to fly and how fast to fly and what overlap to use in certain situations. Like, we fly a lot of quarries and landfills, different specs entirely than it is to collect, a petroleum facility or a chemical plant.
Yep.
So, we started this app to keep a record, so we could fly a quarry, look at the results, and we'd know, okay, we threw it 300 feet and 10 miles an hour, 50% overlap. How did the result? Was it good or was it not good? Do we have to fly slower or lower? And with a drone the size of the one you need to do LiDAR, you have maybe 25 minutes, 30 minutes in the air. So if you can do 40 acres in a flight, you only have so many flights a day. If you can do 80 acres in a flight, you could take a project from 2 days to complete down to 1 day and still have the accuracy you need. So we were trying to keep a database of mission parameters, basically, to optimize output and minimize time on the ground.
So that continuous improvement and optimization, you need the data to do that. So part of the job is to keep the data for the missions to make sure that you had it all available for analysis afterwards.
Yeah, and we only had 4 sets of batteries, so that's 4 flights.
Yep.
So you want to optimize the amount of ground you cover with 1 set of batteries. Otherwise, you're dragging a generator with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of the mission control. Go ahead. I don't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
No, I was just going to show you the app that we came up. These are all the projects that we've done. I think 80 or so in the last 2 years, all up and down the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I set up a template because Fulcrum allows you to attach files to a record. So we added all of our licensing, photos of our FAA licenses, our registration numbers for the drones, the insurance forms, anything the FAA might want to see. So we would just long press on this template and create a duplicate so that it has all those attachments in it. Because if I were to just start a new record, it doesn't have any attachments. You have to attach the attachments to a record first and then make a copy of it.
So you're duplicating the record to get all the credentials, basically all the stuff. What would you call the FAA? The stop.
The ramp check.
Ramp check. Basically, the template holds everything that you would need for a ramp check for the next job that you're about to do.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
So obviously we want the client name, the project name. The address is automated. I was able to use a webhook to automate grabbing the address. It also contains a database of all the major airports in the US, so it automatically tells us if we're within 5 miles of one. And that black bar is just a warning that you need authorization to fly within 5 miles of an airport. Do you have permission?
Yep.
And in this case, we needed permission because this was in the port of Newark, pretty close to Newark Airport. So I actually attached the waiver that I was given, that I applied for.
Okay.
We have our insurance for all the drones in there.
Right.
And the weather is automated. I used a webhook to pull in the weather.
So this is reaching out to a weather station or to some service, basically. You're getting that automatically, not typing it in.
Yeah, you get it anytime you change the location of the this record. So if I hit locate, change the location, it's going to pull the weather at that location at that time.
So that's using a data event to call out to that thing. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We've got our Part 107 credentials in here, each of our licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And MSHA is mine safety. All 3 of us were certified to work in mines, like landfills, quarries. What I was able to do is did a little back-end programming here to FAA licenses expire every 2 years. They need to be renewed. You have to take ongoing training. So I was able to do a little programming to warn us when our training is due. So in the background in this app, it compares today's date to the date that your license expires, and we'll send each of us a text when we get within a month so that they don't lapse.
Cool.
Then we use Air Control as an app that we check airspace before we go to a site. In some cases, there are what's called NOTAMs, notice to airmen. So on the day, we may not be able to fly because maybe the president's on the move or there's some disaster.
So we always check with air control before when we get to the site to make sure that we're legal and that we are allowed to fly.
And it says
So we take
screenshot here. So you got an app,
Yes.
you're taking a screenshot of the app and just uploading the screenshot that you had into Fulcrum at that point?
Yeah, simple. We just pop out to the app, take the screenshot, upload it here.
Okay,
In Fulcrum,
cool.
you can either use the camera to capture an image or upload it, which is
Right.
those two icons. Yeah. And then after that, we're looking at site specifics. So, what's the tallest structure that we might encounter? And say I put 125, the ideal return to home elevation automatically adds 50 feet, just as a safety.
So you're putting
And
in
then-
the 125 and it's calculating the 175, and that way you know where to keep that drone on the return flight home.
Yeah, we use an M300 drone, and you can put in the return to home elevation. So when the drone's finished its mission, what it does is go look at what you told it the return to home would be. It goes directly to that elevation and then directly home.
Got it. So it's
So
really
you want to
important
make
to
sure
get
you're
that tallest
clear.
structure. Yeah, so it doesn't collide with a building that's on the path because it's taking a direct path. So you're guiding it on most of it, but the direct path home still needs to be out of the way of those structures.
Directly. Yeah, exactly.
Sure, makes sense.
And then, anything else, just a reminder, what are potential obstacles
Okay.
to look out for.
Yep.
And then we go into each flight. So in this case, I did this project in one flight, which means one takeoff, one landing, but it was actually 4 missions. So I flew this in 4 different directions because it was a very complicated facility with a lot of tanks that we wanted to get from every angle. So first thing we do is another website, UAV weather, which warns us, hey, you probably shouldn't fly, the wind's too strong, or another screen capture there. Are we flying nadir or facade, which just means is the LiDAR looking down or sideways? And the software we're using back then required you to change the yaw, pitch, and roll of the drone based on how you were flying, this way or this way. So I put those in.
It's no longer an issue for most. Yeah.
Yeah, that became not necessary after we switched to different software.
But basically, any reminders that you need, you're also including here as instructions.
Yeah, there's a lot to LiDAR, so we wanted, and we got in the habit of saying things out loud, so that just so we don't miss anything, because you don't want to mess up it's $50,000 worth of equipment, and you don't want to make a mistake.
One of the really interesting things. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say at the bottom, takeoff status, it says we're cleared for takeoff. That's because we've met all the requirements that were built into the app.
Again, a calculated
Initially, it says you're not cleared for takeoff.
Yeah.
And that's because, we have all these checklists. We flew a PPK, which is post-processing kinematic, which means we have a base station collecting satellite data the whole time we fly.
Yeah.
So is the base station collecting data? You have to connect to it with a Wi-Fi to actually see whether or not it's collecting information. So another step, check that off. Yes, we're collecting data. Let's see.
It strikes me that what you've shown me is everything about the drone missions except for the drone itself. Like, you're still controlling the drone, you're still piloting the drone, but pretty much everything that you're doing with respect to the mission is captured in this. So you've got one place to go to for everything except for the actual LiDAR itself. Is that basically correct? Is there stuff that the drone is doing that isn't making it into Fulcrum, or is it pretty much all here for your mission?
This is to make sure that we fly having covered all of our bases.
Yeah.
No data from the drone is getting into Fulcrum. There's LiDAR you collect, at least the way we flew, post-processing.
Yep.
It's raw data, so we have to sit down with a laptop. We have to get the data from the base station, merge it with the flight data. This is just to make sure that our lens cap is off.
Right.
and we're not landing in a busy area, and the base station is collecting data, because if your base station is not collecting, and you could fly all day and it's useless.
Right. So it's really, I mean, and if we needed to collect the information from the drone, if we needed to get LiDAR data into Fulcrum, we could. I've heard of situations where we do that, but honestly, that's not where Fulcrum played in your drone missions. It was the thing that managed your drone mission and made sure that you were good, that you had everything set up, that all the operations were taken care of, and then you flew the mission and had a record of the fact that it was all good in the ways that you defined good within your missions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And these are just the pre-flight checklist is just a list of things that you absolutely want to make sure, structural stability of the drone, check all of the attachment points, check the blades. Is the antenna securely mounted? We use an antenna on top of the drone and it's got a wire that goes down to the LiDAR. Is that clear of the blades?
Right.
Critical things. Is it flapping and loose? Is it going to, get in the front of a sensor and cause the drone to stop in midair?
Yep.
These are the M300 is pretty big drone. You don't want it to drop out of the sky. It could, potentially cause destruction.
Not to mention the fact that it's hugely expensive. Like the combination of the two is a killer.
Right.
We are coming up to 8. I see 52 minutes past the hour. So if anybody out there has questions that they would like to ask already, time flies, right?
That was fast.
Has questions that they'd like to ask, please get them in now, or else we're not going to be able to have time for them. But a couple of thoughts. One of them is you talked about the fact that you get used to talking to each other. One of the things that we're looking at right now with Fulcrum is how to use agentic AI in Fulcrum going forward, so that you would ask, like you've got a partner out there and you're saying things out loud to your partner, but we're looking at a way to build in agentic AI so that Fulcrum would be listening to what you say out loud as well, and it could respond to you based on what you're doing. Like lens cap is off and it could turn the lens cap off. That's kind of like our audio fast fill right now, but this would be more of an independent thought on it. And it could also do things like look at a series of pieces of information you've got and maybe suggest things to you so that you're actually having a conversation with the AI, and it helps you in managing these things too. That's a little way out. I know I'm talking a little bit science fiction here, but it's definitely part of the plan to develop what we're building out with Fulcrum, and it's an exciting time for that sort of thing. A little beyond the scope of where we're at today, but it's cool, yeah. While we're winding down a little bit, I keyed off when you were talking again prior to this webinar. One of the things you said is some of the best things we built were the easiest to build. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you as far as how you help people in the field or yourselves or whoever it is create apps?
I think one of the easiest to build was a tailboard inspection or tailboard reporting app, which is a form that everyone in the utility that we work with uses when they get to a job site. It lists possible safety issues, things to be aware of, like heat and insects and snakes and truck traffic and hand tool use. And as a paper form that everybody would use prior to work. There was a death on the system, and there's obviously safety stand down. Everybody's review your processes, what went wrong, what went right, and so I thought it's a very short form. It's only a page, so I thought let's put it in Fulcrum and make it so that the guys in the field have to address each situation before they get the okay to go to work. Similar to the drone app, that says clear to fly. This one says you're clear to go to start work. Because human nature, if you have a bunch of questions on a paper form and you may treat it kind of casually, maybe not read it all. The app you have to go through one by one. See if I can find it. You can see that we have 272 records here, and I only built this 6 months ago, I think.
Right.
We quickly adopted it as the way to do it. go back into it.
And there's nothing fancy about this. There's nothing, we're not worried about geolocations, although you capture that just as a matter of course. But
Of course.
you're not doing big repeatables. You're not doing a lot of calculated fields. It's just simple.
I like the geolocation just for the simple fact that if someone doesn't come back, you know where they were.
Sure.
You could describe a line that could be 7 miles, but if they update the location, you could find them.
Yep.
And so it's just a list of, situations. Are we working near traffic? Are we using hand tools? Are we in a substation?
And these do
So
look like they're, yeah, go ahead.
So I built it so that they, if it's not applicable, they click no and they're all filled out already. So they don't have to go through each of those because they don't apply.
Yep.
And if they do, they click the avoidance for those specific working issues. And when they do, and it's all finished, they get the okay to start work, which is at the top under work status. Yeah.
You like it seems to be a recurring design pattern for you. It's like, show me when it's okay. Give me a field that I can look at that says, okay, you're ready to go now. Pretty consistent design pattern.
Yeah, especially with, in the case of the drones, you could have 17 check yes, and if you miss one, you shouldn't have flown. So it just was a no-brainer in my mind. Yeah, if we're going to use technology, let's use it to our advantage.
Yeah. I do have a question that came in. Somebody asked if the videos, we'll have a copy of this webinar video, and yes, you will. That'll be out in the next probably couple of days. Amanda asks, why did you decide to attach the FAA information to each record instead of using the reference files functionality? This is going back to the drone question, I'm sure. So,
well, because they're job specific.
So when the unit of work is the record is the job that you're on, and if you want and you need your credentials in for that job, you need to record that you are available with those credentials for that job. I'm trying to answer the question, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, I guess is what I'm doing here.
No, it's certainly a good way to go. If you, say our licenses are not going to change. So you could use a reference file there. But the FAA waivers is for that day and that time. So the next day, they may not apply.
So really the difference is file attachment for those things where you have where it's a timely situation, and reference files where it's something that's going to be consistent / permanent.
Yeah, we certainly could have used reference files for the licensing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I got to thank you. So we're good with that question, and you're quite welcome. We are hitting the top of the hour, but we've gone through a ton of things. We probably didn't get to everything we could have.
I had a lot more.
I'm sure you do. I have no doubt. Do you have any last comments for people? I'm going to pull up a final slide here with some stuff that we're doing. But do you have any last comments that you'd like to make before we sign off today?
You would ask me recommendations I would make to anyone that was thinking about building apps in Fulcrum, and I made a short list. Always involve the end user. That's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah.
Make use of all the Fulcrum online information and support. Spend some time looking into editing templates, because that can be daunting, because there's a little bit of coding involved. And once you've edited a template and gotten the way you want it, copy it, and so you don't have to do it again. And as far as designing apps, my recommendation is to limit field choices to things that make logical sense and are relevant. So if you're writing an app for someone inspecting structures, and they're looking at a wooden structure, it has different parameters than a steel structure might have. So guide your user logically, instead of giving them a list of 50 questions, 48 of which don't apply.
That using conditional logic can help there a lot too. I hear from people.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there are ways to edit the template so that you don't have 48 blank lines. So
Right.
I had some reports that were really long, but you could shorten them easily if you edit your templates to exclude empty fields.
Excellent. I'd like to thank you, Bud, for joining us today. I'd also like to thank the
Happy
people
to.
who are online. If you want to reach out to Bud, his email is here, budcad1@gmail.com. You can see my email address here. I'd be happy to talk to you. We'd also be happy if you joined us at any of our upcoming events in person. The American Gas Association is coming up very soon now. The Esri User Conference is always a big deal. I'll personally be there for that one. ISE Expo and WEFTEC. There are others, but those are the ones that are most immediately coming up. And so we'd be very happy to talk to you at any one of those, or you can reach out to us by email on the website through your customer service manager, whoever it might be. Bud, again, just thank you very much for taking the time today, going through all these things thoughtfully, and showing us examples of what you've done. And we're very happy to have you both as a customer and a partner, and someone who's used Fulcrum in so many different interesting ways. Thank you very much for being here to tell us about them.
I'm happy to do it anytime. I believe in the product. It's fantastic. I can't imagine anyone works in the field not benefiting from Fulcrum. So I'm happy to be an evangelist for your product. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Bud. And everybody, thank you very much. Have yourselves a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.